Right now, as you are watching this, the maps that determine which California buildings need to be reinforced, which schools require retrofit, which hospitals cannot legally be built where they stand today, and how much every homeowner in the state pays for earthquake insurance. Those maps just changed, and they changed in a way that specifically increases the modeled hazard beneath the most populated part of the state. On August 11, 2026, the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program, in coordination with the Southern California Earthquake Center and the California Geological Survey, released an interim update to the California portion of the National Seismic Hazard Model. Interim updates to this model are unusual. The full national map is updated on roughly a 6-year cycle, most recently in 2023. Publishing an update outside that cycle happens only when new science is significant enough that waiting to the next scheduled revision would be irresponsible. The August 11th update crossed that bar. 2 specific changes drive it. First, a reassessment of the Puente Hills Blind Thrust, the fault system that runs directly beneath downtown Los Angeles, based on new high-resolution subsurface imaging that suggests it may be structurally connected to 2 adjacent thrust systems, permitting a larger multi-fault rupture than previous models allowed. Second, the incorporation into the model of a new generation of multi-fault rupture scenarios. Driven by the growing global evidence that major earthquakes can rupture across multiple previously separate faults in a single continuous event, evidence that has fundamentally reshaped how seismologists think about maximum credible earthquakes since 2016. The updated modeled shaking hazard for large portions of the Los Angeles Basin, downtown East LA, the San Gabriel Valley, and parts of the northern Orange County lowlands has increased not by a small amount. In some grid cells, the projected ground motion for a low probability, high consequence event is up by 15 to 25%. For seismic engineering, where hazard determines design forces, and design forces determine building strength, a change of that magnitude on a map that has quiet legal and financial force is not a minor edit. It is a rewrite. And so the question in this video's title is the one every Californian is asking today, and the one this video is going to answer, honestly, is the big one getting closer? The answer requires more precision than the question, because closer in time is not what changed on August 11th. What changed is our understanding of what the big one could look like when it does arrive. And on that question, the answer is genuinely uncomfortable, because the science on multi-fault rupture over the past decade has unmistakably made maximum credible earthquakes bigger. Today we break down exactly what the map changes are, and what a hazard map is actually meant to do, what the Puente Hills Blind Thrust is, and why a fault directly beneath 10 million people was not recognized until the 1990s. Why blind thrust faults are geologically insidious in ways that make them uniquely difficult to plan around. The earthquake in New Zealand in 2016 that forced every seismologist on Earth to reconsider what a maximum earthquake looks like, and what all of this actually means for the people whose zip codes just moved on the hazard map. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the science, the reassessment, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Are you in the Los Angeles Basin downtown, East LA, the San Gabriel Valley, Orange County, or anywhere in Southern California? Had you ever heard of the Puente Hills Blind Thrust before? Today? Because that fault runs directly beneath the Staples Center, City Hall, and much of the densest urban terrain west of the Mississippi, and a large majority of the people above it have no idea it is there. Tell me your neighborhood, and be honest about whether this is the first time you have heard the fault's name. And for everyone else, did you know a hazard map even exists for California, and that it directly determines your building codes and insurance rates? Because closing the gap between what the map governs and what the public understands is the entire point of this video. Subscribe right now if you want every USGS hazard model update, SCEC bulletin, and California seismic development covered, as it happens, completely free. A thumbs up puts this in front of the 18 million people in the Los Angeles metropolitan area who deserve to know what the map now says about the ground beneath them. Let us go for 6,000 likes. Now let us start with what a hazard map actually is, and why it matters. The National Seismic Hazard Model is not a prediction of when an earthquake will happen. It is a probability estimate of how much ground shaking a given location could experience over a specified time window. Commonly, the shaking level that has a 2% probability of being exceeded in any 50-year period, which corresponds roughly to a 1 in two 500-year event. That level of shaking, translated into engineering language, sets the design forces that new buildings must withstand. It sets the seismic requirements for hospitals, schools, and essential facilities. It feeds directly into how the California Earthquake Authority prices earthquake insurance and how mortgage lenders evaluate seismic risk. When the map changes, the legal, financial, and engineering machinery that runs on it changes with it, slowly, over years, as codes are revised and buildings are reevaluated. But the map is the input to all of that. And the map for Los Angeles just moved. Now, the specific reason it moved, and this is where most Angelenos meet for the first time, a fault that USGS has considered one of the most dangerous urban faults in the country for over 2 decades. The Puente Hills Blind Thrust is a shallow dipping fault system that lies buried beneath the Los Angeles basin. It runs approximately 40 kilometers from the eastern San Gabriel Valley, west and south beneath downtown Los Angeles. And out into central Orange County, its upper edge sits between 3 and 7 kilometers below the ground surface. It has never produced a surface rupture in the historical record, and its existence was not confirmed until subsurface. Imaging campaigns by John Shaw at Harvard and colleagues in the late 1990s and early 2000s revealed the fault geometry from oil industry seismic reflection data. The 1987 Whittier Narrows earthquake, magnitude 5.9, which killed 8 people and caused $360 million in damage, is now understood to have occurred on the Puente Hills system, though at the time the fault had not been mapped. Paleoseismic studies of buried fault-related folds along the Puente Hills system have documented past ruptures at intervals of roughly 3,000 to 8,000 years, with the most recent significant event estimated at 300 to 2,000 years before a present. USGS modeling of a full Puente Hills rupture, a magnitude 7.2 to 7.5 event, has for over 15 years projected between 3,000 and 18,000 deaths and $250 billion in damage in a scenario earthquake striking Los Angeles from directly underneath. This is not a hypothetical fault. It is the fault that seismologists consider potentially more dangerous to the LA basin than the San Andreas itself, because its location beneath the softest, most amplifying basin sediments in Southern California concentrates its shaking exactly where the most people and the most vulnerable buildings sit. Why does the map change now? Because new subsurface imaging by SCEC-affiliated researchers, incorporating the latest generation of seismic tomography and refined interpretations of industry reflection data, has revealed structural continuity between the Puente Hills system, the Elysian Park thrust to the north, and the Compton Fold system to the south, 3 thrust systems that were previously modeled as independent. If they can rupture as a linked system in a single continuous event, and the imaging suggests the fault geometry allows it, the maximum credible earthquake in the LA basin is larger than the previous model allowed. That is the specific update on the map. And this brings us to the second, deeper reason the map moved, the one that applies to everything, not just Puente Hills. On November 14, 2016, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck the northeastern coast of the South Island of New Zealand, near the small town of Kaikoura, and it did something that seismologists at the time considered borderline impossible. The Kaikoura earthquake ruptured across 21 separate faults over a span of approximately 180 kilometers in a single continuous event lasting nearly 2 minutes. Some of those faults were previously mapped. Some were not. Some had been considered too far apart from each other, or too geometrically misaligned to rupture together in the same event. The earthquake did not care. It jumped from fault to fault, cascading across the network, propagating along fault segments that hazard models had treated as separate sources, and it demonstrated in the clearest possible way that the assumption of one earthquake, one fault that had underpinned seismic hazard modeling for decades, was wrong, or at least dangerously incomplete. The scientific community's response was swift. Papers appeared across the following months and years. Hamling and colleagues in Science, Litchfield and collaborators, and subsequent global reanalyses documenting the rupture's geometry in unprecedented detail and asking the obvious question, how many other apparently separate faults in other parts of the world might also be capable of rupturing together in ways that current hazard models exclude? By the early 2020s, that question had reshaped hazard modeling globally. The 2023 USGS National Seismic Hazard Model incorporated a first generation of multi-fault rupture scenarios. The August 2026 California update pushes that incorporation further, specifically for the LA basin thrust system, where the new imaging suggests linked rupture geometries were previously missed. So the honest answer towards the big one getting closer is this: not in time. The recurrence intervals on the individual California fault segments have not changed. What changed is our understanding of what the big one could be, its potential size, its potential rupture length, the number of faults it could involve, the maximum credible earthquake in Southern California, as understood by science in August 2026, is larger than the maximum credible earthquake as understood in July, not because the Earth changed, but because our reading of the Earth improved. Let us handle a clarification here, because it matters. This does not mean an earthquake is more likely tomorrow than it was yesterday. The annual probability of a large event on any given California fault segment remains the same, with small on any given day, real over a lifetime. What the map update changes is the design basis for how prepared the built environment needs to be for the events that do occur. Every hospital retrofit, every school seismic assessment, every new building's engineering, all of it is now referencing a slightly higher bar, because the science says the bar was slightly too low. The contrast that gives this update its most valuable historical anchor comes from the same city, 33 years apart. On January 17, 1994, a magnitude 6.7 earthquake ruptured on the previously unmapped Northridge Blind Thrust, a fault beneath the San Fernando Valley whose existence had not been mapped before the earthquake revealed it. 57 people died. Buildings collapsed across the valley, elevated highway sections fell, total damage exceeded $20 billion, and in the aftermath, California underwent one of the largest reassessments of its seismic hazard maps in the state's history, because Northridge had shown that blind thrusts, faults that never break the surface, were both real and dangerous, and existing maps had underrepresented them. Systematically, the building codes, the Hospital Seismic Act, and the mandatory retrofit ordinances that followed all trace, in significant part, to the map revisions that Northridge forced. Now compare that to July 1933, when the magnitude 6.4 Long Beach earthquake struck the greater LA region. 120 people died, many of them children, as unreinforced masonry school buildings collapsed. Long Beach forced the first modern California seismic building code, the Field Act, which required all new school buildings to be designed to withstand earthquake shaking. The lineage is direct. Every California child today attends a school whose construction is, by law, safer than the ones that killed 120 people in 1933, because a map and its interpretation moved after that earthquake, and the state acted on the movement. Long Beach 1933 and Northridge 1994 are the two clearest historical cases of California hazard maps changing in response to catastrophic learning. In both cases, the earthquake happened first, the map moved second, and the code followed third, and the pattern cost lives in the intervening years. The August 2026 update is the same kind of map movement, but this time it comes ahead of the earthquake. Driven by science rather than tragedy, the buildings that get evaluated to the new standard in the years ahead will be evaluated because the map moved before the ground did, the exact sequence in the correct order that a mature seismic society is supposed to run. Let us be direct about the practical message, because information without action is just anxiety. For Los Angeles Basin residents, this update does not require you to move, and it does not mean an earthquake is imminent. What it does mean is that the ground beneath you, according to the best available science, may deliver stronger shaking in a large event than previous models projected. Two specific actions matter. First, if you live in a multi-unit, soft-story, wood-frame building in Los Angeles, ask your landlord for confirmation that the building has been retrofitted under the city's mandatory soft-story ordinance. If it hasn't, follow up. That ordinance is exactly the kind of infrastructure that map updates ultimately drive. Second, if you own a home built before 1980, and especially before 1940, retrofit costs for foundation bolting and cripple wall bracing are the single most cost-effective seismic investment a California homeowner can make. It is the difference between your house sliding off its foundation and staying on it in a major event. Have Shake Alert active on your phone. It is operational across Southern California, and its warning seconds are the seconds that convert the map's projections into your survival protocol. For California policymakers and code officials, The August 11th update is the science community telling you that the LA Basin design basis needs review. The pace at which building codes, retrofit ordinances, and hospital seismic assessments incorporate the updated model determines whether the map change becomes protective in practice or remains an academic revision. Northridge showed what happens when the code catches up after the earthquake. This is the chance to catch up first. Final thought. For decades, the mental image of the big one in California has been the San Andreas breaking loose. That is still a real scenario, and the science on the San Andreas remains what it has always been. But what the August 2026 map update makes explicit is a truth that has been building for a decade. The big one does not have to be the San Andreas at all. It could be a linked rupture of the Puente Hills Thrust system. Firing directly under 10 million people, it could be a Kaikoura-style multi-fault cascade across faults that current models still treat as separate. It could be, in some scenarios, larger than the maximum credible event the previous map allowed for. The Earth did not change on August 11th. Our reading of it did. And this is exactly how science is supposed to work. New imaging, new evidence, new understanding incorporated into the model that determines what the built environment needs to best survive. The map is not the earthquake. The map is what the earthquake will meet when it arrives. And in a functioning seismic society, the map moves ahead of the earthquake, not after it. Is the big one getting closer? No, not in time, but it may be bigger than we thought. And the years between now and whenever it comes are the years in which the map's new numbers either become the design of buildings that survive it or remain a footnote in a report that is quoted after the fact. Which of those two outcomes we get is not being decided by the fault. It is being decided by everyone above it, this year and the next, and every year until the ground moves. We will track every step of how this map update flows into California, building codes, retrofit programs, and hospital assessments, plus every USGS and SCEC development on the LA Basin Thrust system as it unfolds. Subscribe so you do not miss it, and leave that comment your neighborhood and whether this is the first time you've heard of the Puente Hills Blind Thrust, because the number of yeses in the comments is the size of exactly the problem this update is trying to fix. 6,000 likes. Let us go.